Julia.
Hi. Hi,
Hi.
everyone. Hello,
Hello.
everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm really excited for this next new guest of mine today. For those of you who have not seen my show, it's JH Creative Filipino Hustle Fridays. It's a series that I'm running through a series of shows through covering entrepreneurship. And Filipino Hustle Fridays is focused on Filipino entrepreneurs, influencers, and anyone making a difference in our community, especially here in America. So, Dr. Joel, should I call you that, or Dr. Cuello?
Oh, just call me Joel.
I know you as Tita Joel, and that's
Yes.
how I've always known you. And every time my parents would refer you, it would be, like they'll say, "Oh, he's a professor now," and I'm like, "Wow, that's so amazing." And I remember those days with you, Tito Boyet, well, the Tito Tron, I knew him as, or Tito Salvador, with the multiple nicknames that he had.
Yeah.
And Adele, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's a picture of you holding me on your graduation day when I was a baby too. I think
Yes.
that's a vivid photo. And anyhow,
Right.
yeah, so of course I will look into my parents' recommendations because they know so many brilliant people like yourself. Can you just tell me a little bit about how you met them? And then also, I kind of botched your intro. I did not even say, like, but we'll get into it deeper, that you have a PhD, you have multiple degrees, you've given over hundreds of talks at conferences, and you've also invented in some awesome products in the agricultural space, right?
Right.
So, and I'm sure you'll do a better job introducing yourself. So go ahead and talk about your background a little bit and how you met my
Okay.
parents.
Well, thanks, Julia, for having me today. Yeah, so I'm Joel Cuello. I'm a professor of biosystems engineering here at the University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona. And I've been here now as professor since 1995. So it's been 27 years now. And of course, the cliche is it feels like it was only yesterday, but actually that's true. It feels like it was only yesterday. So I met your parents because your dad was one of my professors in college at the University of the Philippines at Los Banos. And I remember the course. It was Strength of Materials. And I really enjoyed that course. So that's how I first met your father. And yes, I remember I met you as a very little girl. So, yep, that's how we began.
Wow. And so what was, like, did you already know that you wanted to get a PhD at that time? So I'm guessing you met him in your undergrad years at
That is
UP Las Bañas.
correct. That is correct. Yes. So I was doing my college at the University of the Philippines at Los Baños. I was pursuing agricultural engineering. And the great thing about the University of the Philippines at Los Baños is that it's a research university. And it's actually a world-class research university. And so it was, very common for our professors to have PhDs, and there we were surrounded by laboratories where scientific research was being conducted. And there's quite a number of research centers and institutes as well on campus. And we were very close to the International Rice Research Institute, that as students we would frequently visit, to go to their library and even to eat there at their cafeteria. And so I was surrounded by this academic culture. And so it just, permeated me through the environment. And somehow I knew at that time that I was going to pursue, graduate school and get a master's and eventually a PhD. It was just a very organic process that happened in my case.
Wow, that's awesome. And UP Las Bañas is the #1 university in the country, right?
It's
That's what
part.
my dad used to say all the time.
Well, it's not incorrect. So the University of the Philippines at Los Baños is part of the University of the Philippines system. And I think there's about, and don't quote me on this because I've been away for a while now. I think there are at least 9 or 10 campuses throughout the country. Yeah, it's similar
Oh,
to the University of California system, where you have UCLA, you have UC San Francisco, and so on and so forth. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So at some point, what connected you to all the way to Arizona? Like,
Right. So again, when I was in undergrad, I knew that I wanted to pursue higher degrees after graduating from my bachelor's. And so after I finished my bachelor's, I stayed at UP Los Baños as an instructor. So I taught for about 2 years. And then after that, I was enjoying, of course, teaching, but I was very aware, acutely aware that I was not learning new things. And so I was not growing after a while. And so that really became a big motivation for me, really, to go into research. And the way to go into research is to get into grad school, get a master's and a PhD. And so that motivated me to apply for grad school here in the United States. And I was given admission and also assistantship support at the Pennsylvania State University in Pennsylvania. And so, of course, I gladly accepted. And that's where I began my career as a grad student. So I was in
oh, wow.
Pennsylvania at Penn State University for 5.5 years, and I earned two master's degrees and a PhD.
Wow. Like I said, you had multiple degrees.
Oh, and then after that, so I was offered a postdoctoral fellowship by the U.S. National Research Council, and I chose to perform that at NASA Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. And so I was supposed to be at Kennedy for 2 years, but then there was this opening for a faculty position at the University of Arizona. It was only like 2 months that I was at Kennedy when this position opened. And so I talked to my mentor and he said, well, you're not going to lose anything by applying, so go ahead and apply. So I did. So I was interviewed and I was offered the position. So what I did was I waited for me to be able to spend a full year at Kennedy so that at least I could have, a proper duration for my postdoctoral fellowship before I moved to Arizona. So that was 27 years ago. So that's
Oh,
where
wow.
that's how I started here at the University of Arizona.
So did you kind of have it in your mind that you would be a professor? Like this was part of your track? Like, or was it kind of, oh, the opportunity opened up, it was spontaneous, you felt like, okay, let's give it a try.
That's a very interesting question, but I think I knew what I wanted, and ultimately I wanted to be a professor. But I wasn't sure where, at which university I would become a professor. I never had any idea I would end up here at Arizona, but I'm very happy that I'm here. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really hot.
Well, in the summertime, we're in southern Arizona, so summer here is hot. But we get a break of about 1 month because we have a monsoon season, so where there's storms, rain, and so it kind of alleviates the heat. Northern Arizona, though, it's more temperate. But come winter, we have the perfect winter season here in Tucson, Arizona.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
So it's bearable over there. I hear different things about different parts of it. So, and you're
So,
used to it, obviously.
well, our weather from October to March is ideal. It's perfect. Yes. And that's why we get a lot of snowbirds here in the winter season. Yes.
Yeah, we
But we
get
just have to,
snowbirds too.
yeah, we just have to make it through the summer.
A lot of indoor time, I'm guessing. Is
Exactly.
and which I mean, I'm gonna bounce around here, but it makes me wonder. So I know you invented a product where you can help people. It's related to vertical farming, right?
Right.
And it has a lot to do with farming indoors. Is that
Yes.
one of the driving factors? Like what inspired you to do that?
Yeah. So here at the University of Arizona, I would say that I've got two major areas for my research. So I'm a professor, so I teach and I also do research. So on the research part, that's where I do two areas or address two areas. One is on vertical farming, which is indoor farming. And then the other one is growing cells in bioreactors, which are basically vessels or containers where you control the environment. So the reason as to why I focus my interest in these two areas is because I've always been concerned about sustainability, and I'm talking about environmental sustainability. And of course, our global population has been increasing. Like we're now at about, we're going to hit about 8 billion on the planet by November 15 is what just I read from the projections by the United Nations. And so between now and 2050, because by 2050, the population is going to go up to about 9.7 billion. That would be like adding another Europe and another Africa to our planet in terms of population. So to be able to meet the food demand, then we have to increase our food production by 70%. And crop production, that translates into the need to double our crop production. But the problem is on the current level of our food production, we're already utilizing 70% of all freshwater withdrawals. And we're utilizing already half of all arable land. And we're using about a third of our energy expenditure on an annual basis on food production and the food supply chain. So we're going to increase our food production by another 70%. The question is, where are we going to get all the input resources of water and land and energy, as well as input nutrients or fertilizers? So it's a tall challenge. So we need to innovate. And one of those innovations is vertical farming or indoor farming, especially now that we have this changing climate. Like right now, Europe is pretty much burning in some parts because of heat waves, and we're experiencing that part of in the United States as well. And farmers around the world are really, really confused about the weather patterns that have been so much disrupted. So growing certain high-value crops indoors really make a lot of sense, especially in terms of providing not only sustainability but resilience in the food supply. So that's why I'm focused on vertical farming. And of course, that's related as well to my research at Kennedy Space Center, which is space farming. There's a revival now in terms of the interest for sending manned or crewed missions to the moon and Mars. And of course, those are faraway places. And for those missions to be feasible, the astronauts will have to be able to stay in those extraterrestrial environments for extended periods of time. And it's not possible for them to bring all of the food and water that they will need during that extended period of time. So they have no choice but to grow food on site, on the moon and on Mars. And so we're also addressing that challenge of how exactly to go about growing food on the moon and on Mars.
That's impressive. Yeah, I was wondering what the tie-in was, and it made sense that it had to do with
Right.
growth.
And then, if I may explain quickly, on the second area of my research, as I mentioned, is on growing cells in containers, which we call bioreactors. So one of those cells that we're growing is algae cells or microalgae. And that's because microalgae produces a lot of high-value products. Not just nutraceuticals. I'm sure you've heard of omega-3 fatty acids. You've heard of dyes and so on and so forth. But as of now, there's a lot of plant-based meat that's really emerging in the market. And part of the drive to develop plant-based meat is also environmental sustainability. And there's now a number of companies that's using microalgae to produce their plant-based meat products. And so that's definitely one of my interests and thrusts right now as well.
That is fascinating. Yeah, I'm noticing more and more companies coming up with different ways of creating food, or just like, I don't know what the word is to explain it, but non-meat products that are supposed to taste like meat.
Right, exactly. And that is because, unfortunately, producing meat, using live animals is very resource intensive in terms of the feed, in terms of the water requirements. And unfortunately, cows emit CO2 and other greenhouse gases. And in fact, they are one of the biggest producers of greenhouse gases. So one way to kind of go around that is, instead of growing the entire animal, you grow cells of the animals. So you grow the meat cells in bioreactors. So you mass produce the cells, You harvest the cells, and then you reconstitute them into your particular meat product of interest.
Is your
So,
focus? Yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
Oh, it's called cell-based meat or
Oh,
lab-grown meat.
so, and your focus in terms of food, is it more related to like leaf-based foods, like vegetables,
Uh, okay,
greens,
so
or?
with vertical farming, yes, it's crop-based.
Okay.
But with bioreactors, it's more cells from animals.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That makes me understand a little bit more. I'm like bioreactors. Wow, that sounds so nebulous. Just for
Yeah.
us, like, but yeah, that makes sense. So anyone studying that, engineering that,
Right.
knows and understands like the Impossible Burger,
Yes, exactly.
if that's
That's correct. Okay, so Impossible Burger is a
or Beyond
plant-based.
Meat, is that what it's called? Yeah.
Yeah, so Impossible Meat, Beyond Meat, these are plant-based meat. These are not real meat. So they're made from soybeans and some other plant-based protein products. Yes.
That's so neat. And
Yeah.
okay, so I'm also seeing this in social media that I'm starting to see like vertical plant like white structures. It looks really beautiful, by the way. So
Yes.
is
Yes.
yours, I have a picture here.
Okay.
Is this, I mean, over, I have it, and see, I have it multiples.
Yes.
I have a big one of you. See, it's not showing up here. But here, let me pull this off. But there's a picture of you. I think it's the structure that you actually invented.
Okay.
Is it, and is there a name for it? Is it the V box, the green
The
box?
V-Hive. The
Okay, the
V-Hive.
V-Hive.
You
Yeah.
actually showed a picture a bit earlier. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, related to that, so I have a laboratory here at the University of Arizona because again, I teach, but I also do research. And in my research function, I have a laboratory, and of course, I have a group of graduate students working with me as well. And I've got a bunch of grad students now that have worked with me throughout the years. So we call ourselves bioimagineers. And so it's through our collaborations that we invented quite a number of innovations or technologies, again, in those two areas, one on vertical farming and the other one on bioreactors. So this is a very early prototype of one of the innovations that we came up with for vertical farming. And this is the V-Hive. V stands for vertical hive green box. And the idea here really is to be able to maximize the number of crops that you can grow per unit volume of space, because that's very critical to make it really economically feasible. And so we
Wow.
have some automation innovations there so that we could conveniently operate this system and access the plants and the lamps whenever they need to be accessed.
That's really neat. So are you noticing, are people looking to you for expertise on designing these things in different ways, or are people kind of, you know,
Yes, yeah,
it's
yeah.
patent
That's
pending, right?
yes. Those are yes. And for instance, with the photobioreactors, we have now invented about 5 original photobioreactors. 3 of them already have the U.S. patents granted to us or to the university. We are the inventors, but technically the patents are owned by the university. That's
Because you're doing the research there, right?
exactly, exactly, which is normal. I mean, in the United
As long
States.
as your name is associated with it.
Well, I'm the main inventor, the principal
Okay, there you
inventor.
go.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Um, so we
That's
already have
wonderful.
3 of those patented, and 2 have patents pending. And all of those bioreactors have already been licensed exclusively by the University of Arizona to a startup company called Algae Cell.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And so I'm also interacting quite closely with the startup company uh, because they need advice, of course, on the technical aspects of the innovation. Yes.
That's really neat. So the startup formed. Are they doing other things too? And then they reached out to you for consultation?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So they were working on something else actually before they moved into algae, but they're really really interested in algae because of its potential, high potential for sustainable operations. Yeah.
And okay, so then they look for different solutions to then, I guess, recommend to their clients.
Exactly, yes. And then on the side of vertical farming, right now we have about three innovations that we have invented, and all of their patents are pending. And we're hoping that the patent office will decide at least on one very, very soon. It takes them, quite a number of years for them to have that decision, which is normal, by the way.
I heard. Yeah, it's a complicated process. It
Yeah.
doesn't it cost quite a bit too, or
Right. So, but that's our advantage here is that the university takes care of that.
yeah, that is nice.
Right.
That's so cool. And I've
Yeah.
yeah, so is this a different is a newer version
No,
that I saw that was
this is also the same early prototype of the V-Hive green box. Yes.
okay. So what are you noticing as a trend that who's interested in these kinds of things? Are these new farmers or
Right.
who would yeah, go ahead.
So vertical farming is an offshoot actually of the space program. And it started in Japan. Japan was the very first country to commercialize vertical farming back in the late 70s and the 1980s. Because, as you know, Japan is a small country, they have a big population. It's farther up north, so it's not easy to cultivate crops outside year round. So they're very interested in their food security, and they looked around and they saw vertical farming and its promise for providing them greater food security. Because the advantage of vertical farming is you can grow crops 24/7, 365 days a year, and it's independent with geography, the climate, the weather, the season. You can always grow crops, and you can grow the crops always at optimal yield and optimal quality. So
Wow.
Japan saw that, and they jumped into the opportunity, and they developed the industry. So it began in Japan, and
Okay.
then about 12, 15 years ago, that's when it became popular here in North America, and now it's in Europe as well, the Middle East, Singapore, China, and of course, it's starting as well in the Philippines. So now it's global. And so we have
Yeah.
this International Association for Vertical Farming, and I'm serving as one of the two vice chairs for that association. Yeah,
You must be busy.
yeah, that's part of the reason. But it's very rewarding. I feel rewarded because I get to interact with the stakeholders of the industry. And, this is a solution that we know. And of course, I know this for a fact that would be of help to the planet because it's definitely much more sustainable than regular outdoor type of cultivation. So it's going
This
to
is
help.
great.
Yeah.
I could see this blowing up, especially for people like me who's not really great at farming. I just I don't have a green thumb and I don't like being outside too long, just bugs like
Yes.
me. But yeah,
Right.
I would definitely purchase something like
Yes.
this to, either even just for having plants indoors and just being able to maintain that, but even to grow a little garden on the inside.
Right. Oh, and I'm glad you brought that up because so again, I mentioned the industry began in Japan around 1980s, but as you know, from that time forward to the present time, a lot of technological advancements have taken place. And you may have heard of this that right now, in terms of technology, we are in the era of the fourth industrial revolution. That's the that depicts the convergence between the physical, the digital, and the biological. And an ideal representation of that really is vertical farming, because you have the biology there represented by the crops, and then you've got artificial intelligence, you've got data analytics, you've got automation, you've got robotics. So you've got all of these high tech innovations converging to really make this innovation work. And that is it makes it sexy and it makes it really attractive to young people. So young people, they're not interested in outdoor farming in general, but because this really applies so much, innovations and technologies that are really cutting edge, it really has attracted so many young people, which is great because we need
Yeah.
them to really, shore up and foster our food security as a planet.
Right. And sustainability is huge. Young
Exactly.
people these days care more about the environment. They're
Absolutely.
not ignorant to everything that's happening. So that is really neat. I'm glad you brought that point out that
Yeah.
everything related to vertical farming, that's where it converges. I've
That's
never heard that before.
yeah.
So with your the products that you've invented,
Mhm.
is there like an app or something that's associated with these things?
Yes. So that's one of the things that will be developed by the company going forward as well. Because and I'm glad that you reminded me again, because you said that you would be interested in purchasing perhaps a modular vertical farm. So what I can tell you now is when you do that, and there are now products actually out there that you can purchase, those are basically fully automated, pretty much. So you don't have to worry about when to water the plants or how much light to provide. Everything is programmed. And so it can basically operate on its own. Yeah.
My mute button was like hiding behind another thing. So I was like, it's taking a little bit. But no, that's really great. So an automated farming system, that's
Right.
perfect for someone like me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say that there are huge vertical farming companies here in the United States as well. And I would say that they are the pioneering companies globally for vertical farms. I know that
Oh,
Japan started everything, but right now, in terms of technology and innovation, I would say that the most cutting edge companies are American companies. And I can mention Plenty, which is based in California, although they're now spreading to other countries as well. The other one is Aero Farms. The other one is Bowery Farming. And these companies have raised millions of dollars of investment. And they're using, of course, a big chunk of that in research and development. And a lot of that is geared toward automation, robotics, artificial intelligence. And so, again, that's heading toward an operation of the vertical farm that is virtually fully automated.
wow. That I'm only seeing bits and pieces of this, all this kind of invention and genre through social media. It
Yeah.
helps a lot. I know you mentioned that you have like a show where you're interviewing people. Is
Mhm.
it a talk show or
Yeah.
yeah, so tell us a little bit about that.
Right. I hesitate to call it a show, but my main motivation for that really is as a stakeholder. Again, I'm a professor at the University of Arizona, and the major functions that we do are teaching or instruction, research, and then the third one is outreach or service. So it falls under that rubric of outreach and service. And of course, the industry pretty much that I'm directly serving is the vertical farming industry or indoor farming industry. And so I thought that it would be really informative to the members, the stakeholders of the industry, if I could interview some of the major players in the industry, because it would be instructive to the other members of the industry. So that's really my motivation for that. And so, yeah. And again, as a vice chair of the Association for Vertical Farming, it has given me the privilege of access to quite a number of the major players in the industry. So, why not use that for the good? So that's what I'm trying to do.
And that's a fast way to spread information too, just having that up there. And
Exactly.
you pre-COVID, you probably had to go to a lot of conferences. I remember it said that you had 300 talks about this.
Well, but that's since I began my academic career, though.
Uh, well, still, I mean, significant. And then
Yes.
it looked like you recently went to a summit in
Yes.
2021. Yeah.
Yes. And the big one is that's coming up is the annual meeting of the Association for Vertical Farming. So we're organizing that right now. It's going to be done in Dortmund in northern Germany, and this will be in late September. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have quite a network there, global network of
Yes. Yeah.
of all these countries that are really into
Right.
vertical farming.
Yes.
So I know we're going to conclude pretty soon, just to
Okay.
respect your time. I was just wondering, I wanted to kind of dive into a little bit about the aspect of like adjusting to American culture and things like
Right.
that.
Right.
How have you managed to adjust? And I know by now I think you're used to it. And how was it being a professor in an American university?
Yes. Well, of course, I had to adjust. Beginning when I was, a graduate student, because that's how I started in the United States. Of course, the Philippines was a former colony of the United States, and so as a country, as a culture, the Philippines assimilated a lot of strands of American culture, and then, of course, you have access to popular culture as well through TV and movies and music, but it's different when you get here. You still have to adjust to a lot of things, a lot of nuances and subtleties. But as a grad student, and I was fortunate that I came here as a grad student, because when you're in a university setting, which is really designed for learning, then you get to learn a lot of those things. But still, I would say that I didn't really become, I would say that uh, accustomed to it 100% until, I don't know, maybe it took me 10 years. So that's when, you really are
Yeah.
in it.
No, right. It takes time for sure. I mean, even certain things, like for me, when my parents moved here, I
Uh,
was pretty fluent in Tagalog, and then eventually
yeah,
I lost it.
yeah,
And so, but there's certain nuances too, like and idioms that I don't fully understand. So
right, yeah,
yeah, and I've grown up here most of my life. So yeah, I just anybody who had to adjust and then also grow a career here and be successful,
yeah.
that's a major feat.
Yes,
So,
yes, that's right. Yeah,
and that's why I wanted to interview you
yeah.
today.
Oh, thanks. And as a professor at an American university, it's a real privilege. And I love American students uh, because they're open and they're curious and they ask questions and grounded in that way. So I quickly adapted to that.
So have you noticed, has there been a shift generationally? Because if how long have you been a professor now? Has it been
27 years.
yeah, so there's
Yeah,
3 decades of almost 3 decades, like
yeah,
different um generations. So
right. And that was
no,
excluding the 5.5 years as a grad student.
yeah.
So,
Wow.
so I've been here over 30 years now. So you're right, over 3 decades. Has there been a generational shift in the last 3 decades? I would say yes. It's kind of subtle, but there have been changes. I would say that the young people today are much more open. As you mentioned, they're more concerned about the environment, about sustainability, which is great because that's really important. And also because the world has become much more globalized. The European Union was formed at the beginning of this new century in 2000. It's funny, as a sidebar. My first time in Europe was in 2000. I had a conference in France, and I was in Paris, and not everybody then in France, even in Paris, would be happy to speak to you in English. But now, if you go to France, everybody speaks English. They don't mind.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
been a part of the EU now for
Yeah.
it's 22 years. Yeah, so everybody is.
Wow.
So that's what I'm trying to point out here is that the world has become much more globalized and internationalized. I would say in the past 3 decades. Uh, because we share the same media, we share the same culture pretty much. which is American culture, Western culture. Not to say that just because everybody is familiar with Western culture that they would adopt Western values, and that's
Right.
perfectly fine. But everybody has become familiar with the Western culture, which has become the de facto global culture. And I think that's helped in terms of people being able to communicate readily with one another.
Right. Yeah. And America's learning a lot from other cultures.
Oh,
Like for
exactly.
example, I mean, just like what you said, I mean, Japan knew all along in the 80s, like vertical farming. So
Yeah, and
Western,
on the cultural side, when I was a grad student at Penn State, there was only one Mexican food place uh, where we were at the university. But now, you go everywhere in the United States, and pretty much everybody's familiar with Mexican food, and that's also true for a lot of Asian food, Thai and even Middle Eastern, and now
right.
Filipino food is gaining some renown as well. So
Oh
I think
yeah.
that here in the United States, we're just much more attuned now to the rest of the world. Yes.
This is so brilliant. I'm so glad I got to like really catch up and get to know you a little bit more, even though I knew you as my like tito, everyone's just at a certain level you kind of know, but I really am thankful that you took the time to just kind of talk about your story. Is there anything you'd love to end with as far as a message to Filipino Americans and Filipino entrepreneurs out there?
Yes, so I would say that um, be optimistic. uh, I think as Filipino Americans, we have a lot of strengths in terms of the cultural strengths that we can, combine together. We're hybrids, so we can get the best of Filipino culture, American culture, and mingle them together. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And America, as a nation, in a way, has always been like that. It's always assimilating things, from so many places, and that's the strength even of the American English compared to, let's say, British English, is that it's very acquisitive as a language, and therefore it's so dynamic and it's so living, and that's why it's so predominant, the predominant language globally. So in the same way, I look at it as a strength being a Filipino American, because we have these resources not only here but in the Philippines, culturally and in some other aspects, and we can pick and choose the best ones and combine them together. It's a privilege.
It really is. It's awesome, and for someone like you to be able to succeed and grow in your success and profession is amazing here. It's not the easiest thing to do either. Um, One of the
uh,
things noticed in all my talks that I've had so far with interviews here is like I feel like resilience is very strong in our culture.
okay.
So I really see that in you and what you've done with all the degrees and inventions you've had and everything you've accomplished. I'm so proud and privileged to have interviewed you.
Well, thank you.
I just want to make sure if anyone wants to connect with you, would you say LinkedIn, or how can they follow you and kind of follow your journey?
I'm on LinkedIn, and I can share my email address as well. No problem. Yeah. So it's
Okay,
Coelho
awesome.
J at
Yeah,
arizona.edu.
perfect. I happen to have it.
There it is. Yeah.
And to for those who are interested in learning more about vertical farming, is
Yeah.
this also a good place to go to?
Absolutely. Yes. Correct. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So vertical-farming.net.
Yeah.
Um, for those who are interested and want to interview with me, I would love to have you all just contact me. And of course, Tita Joel, thank you so much for hopping on today and taking time out of your busy schedule to talk about your story.
Well, thanks so much, Julia, and I really appreciated you having me today. Yes.
Yes, and I know you'll be visiting the Philippines soon. I hope you get in touch with my parents. We need to make sure that my parents get a hold of you too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All
I'm
right.
gonna go ahead and end this broadcast, and I'll see you on the other side.
All right. Thank you so much.